I'm here with Laura Jensen of our California Water Commission to discuss a really important initiative that the Commission is spearheading to help us prepare in California for what will be longer, more punishing droughts in the future. Now, anyone who's lived in California knows we've experienced challenging drought conditions recently and over the last 20 years. Over half of the years since the year 2000 have been dry or drought years, and 8 of the last 10 years have been significant drought years. So increasingly, we need to adapt to and become resilient to worsening drought. And Laura, the Water Commission has taken on this project at the request of myself and our Environment Secretary, our EPA Secretary, as well as our Agriculture Secretary. I think the genesis of this was a recommendation back in a water resilience portfolio that we put together in the governor's request in 2020 that called for recommendations to help us maintain our way of life through a drought that would last at least 6 years in length, with a special focus on what are we going to do to protect our communities, but also our natural environment and species.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about the approach that the Water Commission has taken to this work.
Yeah, so first let me just say a quick thing about the Water Commission, which is we are in this unique position where we serve in an advisory role to the Department of Water Resources and when requested to the administration or the legislature. And we are a neutral, non-regulatory body, so we have this ability to really gather diverse voices and tackle some complex issues related to water management and water policy. So that really helps us in our approach to this topic of drought, particularly because when we were asked to do this, when we launched this work, it was spring of 2022. So we were staring down year 3 of a crippling drought here in California. So the Commission's approach to this work has been to really leverage our public forum, our monthly public meetings that we hold, and to bring in the network that we have developed through advancing several water resilience portfolio actions now, and try and bring in as many diverse voices as possible to start crafting strategies to protect communities and species in the event of drought.
I'm really glad that you took a moment to explain the work of the Water Commission and where you sit. I think a lot of folks across California following water policy may hear a lot about the Department of Water Resources, but not the role of the Water Commission. That's actually quite an established body in the state. So you all, as a public body and the staff of a public body, are getting input through these monthly public meetings of your commission. As I understand it, you've also gone out this summer to conduct public workshops to solicit input. Talk a little bit about those and give us some key takeaways from those discussions.
Yeah, so our public workshops are actually sort of the capstone on the end of a process that involved many layers of public outreach. We started with this slower ramp up because we wanted to make sure we had our arms around the issue, especially given that so many state resources were directed to dealing with these on-the-ground critical emergency situations related to drought. So we talked to a lot of experts here in California, in other Western states, and in drought-prone countries, pulled together a framework for how to move forward. And then we conducted sort of layers of outreach. We did some special listening sessions with tribes. We convened a drought working group. And with that drought working group, we put together some preliminary or draft strategies for protecting communities and species. And then we took those to our workshops, which we just hosted this last month in July. And those were really well attended. We had hundreds of people attend our workshops, and we talked them through the strategies that we had developed to solicit their impact. So we were talking about things like really scaling up groundwater recharge, because one of the big themes that came out of our initial research with those experts was you have to be thinking about drought during non-drought years. These things have to be managed together. So we have this opportunity. We started in the middle of a critical drought, and then we got this crazy wet year last year. So we have this opportunity to really take that advice and think about it as we're continuing to have drought discussions. So we're talking about scaling up groundwater recharge. We're talking about fast tracking the state's response to shoring up water supply reliability for communities and being more nimble in how it is supplying emergency funding to communities during those drought periods. We are talking about protecting species by thinking about systems and landscapes and doing some planning to ensure that these systems that support the species that are so critical to California and Californians have the systems that they need to be able to weather a drought and rebound from drought, because they are so vulnerable to drought because they don't have the time for their populations to rebound between these droughts. And then lastly, we're talking about some of the things that underpin that, like having alignment at state agencies and staff capacity at state agencies to be able to tackle the drought issue, as well as having data, forecasting data to be able to plan for droughts and anticipate droughts, supporting our key partners, tribes, nonprofit organizations, local governments who are so critical for responding to droughts, and also informing the public so that they understand the status of not just droughts, but what is happening with water and water scarcity in California. So these are the things that we brought to the workshops. And I would say the main takeaway is that people were generally on board with where we were headed. We definitely heard some new things pop up, some emphasis on brackish water desalination, on surface water storage, the need for land use and really integrating land use and water use, which gets at some of the SGMA and groundwater management's implementation. And then we also heard about soil health. We heard a lot about soil health and the need for soil health when thinking about drought and recharge in particular.
Wow, fascinating. I'm really impressed with the way that you described the approach of the Water Commission to go out there and do that research, including global research on what's happening across the world for drought resilience, and then to develop a set of approaches or recommendations and then go out to the public and share those and get feedback, but also additional input. And it sounds like you are really developing a set of comprehensive, thoughtful, and integrated recommendations. One observation I have is that we learn in California and we continue to improve every drought we experience. I helped lead state response during our drought from 2012 to 2016, and there's a lot that came out of that drought, including the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And I know we're going to learn a lot from the most recent drought of the last 3 years, thanks to the work of the Water Commission. So really appreciate it. Last question for you is, when can we expect these recommendations to be shared publicly in the final form?
Yeah, well, so there's sort of two critical milestones coming up. At our August 16th meeting, we will be sharing what we learned at the workshops. And then all of that is going to be sort of brought together with the other research and conversations we've been having, so that we'll present a draft version of our white paper and then a final version of our white paper before the end of this year.
Wow. Well, I know working for Governor Newsom, we had developed, coming out of the drought, it ended in 2016, a set of observations, lessons learned, recommendations that then informed the way we entered into the most recent drought. So I'm really confident that all the work that you and your colleagues have done and all the input we received from so many people is going to help us be that much more drought resilient moving into the future. If you want to engage to provide your input or to review the draft set of recommendations that are coming out, please join the Water Commission on August 16th or go onto their site so that you can keep track of what's happening and have a chance to review those draft recommendations once they come out. Thank you so much for all you do, Laura.
Thank you.